It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. This week, we're joined by Charlie Earnest. So last week, after hours, after the talk, I jokingly suggested that we've got a saw maker from Warwick. And can anyone guess who he is? And of course, we mostly had Brits left on the call, and they thought that it was Warwick in the UK, and they couldn't figure out who it was. So Charlie is from Warwick, Rhode Island. So welcome, Charlie.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to spotlight Charlie and myself, and we're going to do this interview style. So, Charlie, do you want to introduce yourself by telling us who you are and how you got into saw making?
My name is Charlie Earnest. I'm from Warwick, Rhode Island, and I don't know how I got into saw making. I like to tinker with stuff, and I started out wanting to do hand tool woodworking, and one thing led to another. I realized I didn't have a decent saw, and I bought a saw, and then I decided I'd like to know where it came from. I did a little bit of research and kind of fell down a rabbit hole of saws. And at a certain point, I discovered how expensive these things are to buy new, and figured I'd give a go at making one myself. And one thing led to another, and here I am.
So when did you start? Give us a timeline.
So I made the first saw that I made from new parts was made about this time, probably a year ago. I haven't been doing it that long. I got into hand tool woodworking a couple of years ago. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, I was terrified of waking her up in the middle of the night with all of my projects and stuff. So I started buying. I wanted to build a workbench. I started buying hand tools and familiarizing myself with them. And one thing led to another. And so, I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought.
How did you get into saw making?
So about a year ago, I started making. Decided I started out by making handles, and discovered that I had a knack, kind of a knack for that. And when I gave the saw making a try. I decided I like to tinker with things, and I decided that I really wanted to give it a go. And being a stay-at-home dad, I have the time to experiment with with different things and and try and figure it out. Because there was no book out there for for how to make a saw, or how to certain processes that need to be done. It's all kind of a learning experience. There is no not even, sometimes with some stuff there's not even a right way to do it. It's just the way that gets the job done.
So how did you get into that research? Where did you start to learn how to make a saw?
I read everything. The same way I pretty much, I have an insatiable curiosity about a lot of different things. And I started reading old forums, chat forums, woodworking forums, anywhere I could find references to how saws were made. I also collect older saws, so I have I'm pretty familiar with them, and I had done research into into those types of saws and stuff. And I just kind of I figured it out on my own. I read I have scoured, I wouldn't say scoured the internet, but I've read little snippets here and there, and just continued to put things together until I eventually found a way that worked for me, because I don't have any of the large equipment that some like to be able to fold brass to make a brass back. I don't have the equipment to do that, or the knowledge, actually, because I was never a tool maker, or even a woodworker until a little while ago. So a lot of this stuff was new to me. I had to learn I didn't know the right names, for the tools I was looking for example, or, what type of tools did what. So I've just done a lot of reading, a whole lot of reading on whatever subject I could find that, might be related to what I was trying to do.
I guess then the question is, what inspired you to get into woodworking? Was it due to the lockdowns and having a bit more time at home, or?
No, I wanted a real workbench. This was about 6 years ago now. I wanted a real workbench. I had always built stuff and functional things. I don't build beautiful things, by any stretch. I'm a heavy functional type of stuff. And I realized I didn't know how to make a workbench. I knew how to screw boards together and stuff, but I didn't know that much about what a regular workbench was, or what I needed to do to make one. So I started reading about it, and discovered hand planes, and started buying planes and figured out what I liked, and then chisels, and I was starting that way with saws too. It's like the natural progression. Once I bought a saw, except with all the other tools, I managed to get rid of everything except for my users. And with saws, once they come into the house, they never leave again. So, it just was so interesting how little, when you look at the Stanley type studies for bench planes, and so much is known about so many other, tools and makers. But when it comes to saws, especially in the US, so much is unknown. And I found that very interesting. And it kind of went right along with my my love of, researching stuff and, looking into things. And it's just, I find it great, really satisfying to, to learn about the way people did things, 150, 200 years ago, and the way it's amazing, these tools that, people made, and the saws, and I still use saws that are 150 years old. So to be able to try and make a product like that, that somebody else could use in 100 years, I find very satisfying.
Okay. And with saws, making saws, is there a resource that you would recommend to anyone who wanted to learn how to make a saw?
I would recommend joining the Facebook group, saws using, collecting, and whatever the proper name of it is. But you can find little snippets, from Diston and Atkins and some of the other makers, like little things here or there. But there is no single resource. This question actually comes up a lot, and I've done my best to to answer the questions that people ask, that ask me. I believe in sharing knowledge, and I've done my best to answer, the questions about how I do things. But most of my knowledge came from, I'm still learning, how to do things, and, trying to figure out new and better ways, to do things, because everybody does it, slightly differently. And, trying to figure out how to mill brass, with a drill press, I probably could have asked somebody and they would have told me the right way to do it. But instead, I tried to figure it out on my own, so I could learn about what I was making as well as just making it. I wanted to understand the way the parts fit together, and understand, I guess a little bit more intimately the right way to do things.
Sure.
It just
trial and error.
makes sense to learn things, that way.
Sort of trial and error, and learning what works and what doesn't work, and understanding it inside out.
Yes, because the first saw I made came out great. It was straight. I still use it. It cuts well. I made it to somebody had talked to me about maybe making some saws, and so I wanted to put together a saw to show him, to give him an idea of what I wanted to do. And I did it in a weekend, and it turned out great. Every saw that I've made since then, it seems, it takes much longer, because I didn't know anything when I made that saw. I didn't know, how to, test, how to make sure the blade was true and straight, and, it cut well, and it did what I wanted it to, which was good enough for me. But then I just, I discovered that that's not quite all there, all there is to it. And the more it seems, the more I know, and, the less satisfied I am when things don't turn out, perfect all the time, because it's difficult to, to get when, within the shop that I work in, and, doing the majority of stuff by hand, being the level of preciseness required sometimes is, is difficult to achieve. So, I'm always trying to, to find a better way of doing things while still working within, where I want to stay, because I enjoy doing it by hand, and I do like the way that I do it. And I don't have room to do it any other way, because I don't have room for any other equipment. So I think it's just a continual learning process to try and, find the best way for me that works.
So I guess, what rabbit holes have you gone down in terms of perfection? I think everyone here is probably guilty of going down some sort of rabbit holes. You must have gone down something.
Listening to Jim and Scott talk, about the giant chunk of metal and, of steel that he can't move. I'd love to have one of those, and a giant surface plate, that can, granite surface plate. Jim said that, is so heavy. I would love to have something like that too. Just trying to figure out how to, twist and bend metal to make it flat, to lay on a surface plate flat, is in and of itself, difficult, because a lot of times backsaw plates are so thin, I wouldn't, hammersmith them the same way that I would if I was trying to, work a problem like a wavy blade out of like a handsaw that has a, a thicker steel. The risk of hammer marks and everything is too great. So, trying to figure out, how to bend stuff, spring steel, they call it spring steel for a reason. It doesn't, you can't just do one of these and, and have everything suddenly be fine. Learning how to use a shear. I have a small little shear I use to cut the plates out, which tends to put stresses on things and, bend things in different ways. Trying to figure out all of that. I mean, the list of rabbit holes I've gone down is endless. My life, I feel like, for the last year has been one giant saw rabbit hole. The relationship between, how tooth geometry and, how you want a saw to cut, and how you file it and what it's going to be used for, and, what type of wood. All these things are, all things that I had to learn too, because I never, I didn't even start filing or sharpening saws until November of last year. I took a class at the end of the month. So everything for me has been like that. It's because I didn't know anything. I still feel like I don't know that much. But I really had to, kind of immerse, myself in all of these things, just to be able to put out a product that, I not only was I proud of, but that, would function the way that it's, intended to. It's been quite a learning experience, that's for sure. My wife's probably extremely tired of hearing me talk about it.
Well, it's clear that you've definitely got a passion for it, so I'm sure you'd love to talk about it, and I have definitely seen that you do. So what materials do you use regularly? From what I'm hearing is brass sprung steel, but where do you source these materials, and what other materials do you use, if any others?
I order all of all of my metal bits from a US distributor called McMaster Carr. I get flat bar stock, brass bar stock, 3/4 inches by 1/4 inch thick. I use that for most of my saws, and then on some smaller dovetail saws, I order 5/8 by 1/4 inch thick, to give a lighter back. The spring steel, I order through them as well, in different thicknesses, 16 thousandths, 18 thousandths, 20 and 25 for for back saws. I make a lot of, different saws. I don't have just one saw or two saw or, or even three saws, that I make. Everything that I do is kind of custom. So I kind of order as needed. But that stuff all comes from my slitting saws for slitting the brass. Anything like that I need generally comes from McMaster Carr. The wood I source locally at a lumber yard. A couple of mine in the middle of Rhode Island that I found. They're pretty good for, finding some stuff. And that's, there isn't, there isn't a whole lot of parts, or anything else necessarily, that's needed, at least not at this stage for what I'm doing. People like Shane Skelton who make, with the Damascus steel and some of the, the beautiful work he does. I'm sure his needs are, are a little bit greater and probably has to cast a wider net to source, what he needs. But for me, I'm still, pretty basic with what I need. But yeah, I get it all through the same US distributor, and it seems simple in and of itself, but the pieces and making them, is simple. When it's time to put it all together, sometimes I find it's not quite as simple as I thought.
So, what are the typical tools that you use to make your saws?
I have a drill press, and that's about it. I use for handles, I have two main rasps I use from Karate in Italy. They're a 6 grain and a 10 grain.
I'm just watching Jim put his thumb up for that.
I do all my shaping basically with those two rasps. I can do 95% of a handle, and they're the same rasp. They're just different. The texture they leave is just different. But I can do 95% of a handle with just those two rasps. And before I had those, and I didn't have those at first when I first started making handles. I've bought every file I could find at every flea market and every other place I've been, that might be of use, for the last year. And I started out using files actually to make them, and moved up to the nicer, higher quality rasp. But they're just straight 6-inch modelers rasps. That does all I have some little files and little smaller needle rasps that I use for for detail work. But just the two main rasps for the rest of it. The saw handle maker's rasp, I find that I don't really find it that useful for the majority of things. I think a straight rasp works better. My granite surface plate to make sure things are flat. I had to buy one of those. I didn't have one, prior to starting all of this, and I find that's indispensable because, trying to check to see whether there's the brass that I get, a lot of times, they ship it, it doesn't show up straight. So trying to work out the bends and stuff, I find that, having a surface plate is indispensable. A lot of people probably have one of those. I, however, did not. I use the drill press with a screw slotting blade on it, and an arbor that goes in my drill press, and I use that to slot the brass. And that's one of the most difficult parts, is trying to slide that across, because I hold it and I slide it across the drill press table, and trying to find the right speed and everything else that it needed to be done at, and how deep I could go. It was trial and error. And I think I've got it down pretty good now, but like I said, if when the brass comes, if it's not flat, and and there's even a little bit of tilt or anything else, or I'm not putting equal pressure on it, the slot ends up slightly off, and that's enough to throw off the whole saw. And unfortunately, it doesn't always show up until everything's all said and done. I have a 10-pound or 10-ton press I use for stamping the backs, and I do a friction fit with the back to the plate, where it's very similar to a folded back. You squeeze the slot closed like very small, like 2 thousandths or of an inch, smaller than what it's sawn at. And you squeeze it shut with the press, and then you hammer it on, very similar to the way you would put a folded back on a saw plate, and it creates that same fit. So I needed the press for that. Other than that, it's
Can you go into a bit more detail on that when you say it creates the same fit?
so
Not everyone, I'm not sure everyone here understands.
Okay, so with the traditional folded saw back, or the spine on the back saw, they fold it into a horseshoe shape, and then where it's real tight down at the bottom, that's where it pinches the top of the saw plate. It creates, I'm trying to think of what it's called, it's not a choke point, but anyway, it pinches the top of the saw plate in the real tight bottom part of the horseshoe bend. So when I bend a slotted saw back, it's, I can't get that horseshoe shape from the shape of the metal itself, because it's just a straight slot. So I just squeeze, the very bottom of it closed, to give it a shape like this, I suppose. And when I hammer it on, if you leave an air gap along the top of the saw plate, in between the top of the slot on the inside of the slot, it's like I can't think of what it's called, but it leaves it's the same, it's called a friction fit. It's the same it's the same principle as what a folded back. I'm holding it into air through pressure and the metal itself, instead of using like epoxy, or some people use Loctite. And so I started doing it that way. I don't even know why I decided to do it that way, but I like the idea of, of having something that was more similar to the way things were traditionally done. But it needs to be just right. If it's too tight and you try and hammer it on, it puts the metal in compression, and you end up, with a tooth line that, is so wavy, and there's no way to correct it, without hammering the back off. So it's very touch and go with how much you can close it up before it's too tight, for the saw plate to fit into. And at that point, you end up with a lot of problems, a lot of wavy saw. The bottom edge will be wavy, and there's just no way to correct that type of thing without starting over again.
Okay. So in terms of techniques, I guess saw plates were typically tapered. Do you taper your saw plates or not?
On back saws, I've read about in books about how it's, they're, a good one would be tapered. I've never actually run across any, tapered back saw plates, with the exception of, the more modern stuff that, Dista made. I've tapered one saw plate, well, two actually. The hand saws were tapered, of course. I tapered. I made a 14-inch back saw not too long ago with a tapered plate, and I managed to achieve a pretty good taper on it. I was pretty proud of it, almost enough to run it without set, which was my goal. However, it once again, because of the way I do things, I ended up doing a lot of it by hand. And I couldn't, that taper has to be squeezed into such a short area above the tooth line and drop pretty sharply, in a very small space. And doing that by hand, I couldn't quite accomplish it in the space needed. But I started out with a belt grinder. I had read about a method on backsaw.net, a guy who had done it before and had tapered some saw plates, and he was using a belt grinder. So of course, I bought a cheap one and decided to give it a go, and it worked at first. Unfortunately, I eventually caught the bag on fire from the hot metal filings, and after the third time that happened, I gave up using that, and I started doing it with sandpaper and a block, and marking it off, and worked at it obsessively for quite some time, because I was determined to to make it work, and it did. It wasn't the prettiest saw plate, but it did work, and the saw cut very well. But it was a lot of time and effort and determination, to get it to that point.
Okay. What about your tools and jigs for repetition? Have you made any jigs that help you repeat the same tasks, or not really?
No, I mean, there are some I probably could make. One for me, for saw bolts, making sure they're the same length every time. Um, but no, I don't really use jigs. And, a lot of people have, mentioned this to me, about how to speed up the process and stuff like that. The thing is, though, is that almost every saw that I make, is different, in some way or another. So a lot of the jigs that, work for these repetitive processes, don't necessarily work for me because I'm not, making the same saw, over and over again. So what worked, the time before won't necessarily work on the next saw, even if they look very similar, because the handle shape's different or, because of this. And, while it's immensely frustrating some days, to constantly have to, reset everything up to do the same thing over and over again. In the bigger picture, I enjoy making different saws. I enjoy making different handles. I think that's something that I bring to the table that, not everybody does. So while my process is long, without the jigs, a lot of stuff does take longer. I mean, there's no way around that. But it also allows me a latitude in what I make and how I make it, and the final look of stuff, because of the way I do things, because there is no jig or no set pattern for things. I can make 3 saws and they can all turn out slightly different, even though they may be basically the same saw. And I like that variation. I think it lends a a certain customization to to everybody's saw. Everybody who gets a saw, very rarely they have the same saw as somebody else. I might make them and they might look slightly the same, but I change small details and stuff. And I think that having too many, I think it would lock me into too much of a making the same thing over and over again. And part of what I enjoy about saw making is the variety, and the experimenting with new things, and not really being locked into into a place where I have to make the same thing over and over again.
Okay. So I guess we're getting on to finishing. How do you like to finish your saws?
I use the Skeleton Saws peacock oil and shellac with wax on top. Now, the combination for how I use those things varies depending on the wood. Sometimes I'll use like a spit coat of shellac to seal the wood a little bit before I put any oil on it. If it's something that I know is going to keep sucking up oil for days, it does take a while. So I'll put a spit coat of shellac on it first, and and then sand, and I'll I might do that a couple of times before I put any oil on it. But usually it's I do a coat of oil, a heavy coat of oil, let it sit for a couple of days, and and then successive coats on top of that, and then I finish it with a soft wax. The one thing I do differently, though, probably than a lot of people, is I let my handles sit for a while as I'm finishing them. Like, I don't feel the need to I don't push stuff out of my shop quickly enough that I need to have it done right now, this second. And so I like to give them a little bit of time as I'm finishing them, to build a finish on it, let the first coat of oil dry for a day, usually 2, before I even move on to another coat of oil or anything. I found that I like the look. I like the way that my saw handles end up looking, spacing it out a little bit instead of trying to just kind of layer it on thick and heavy, and have it drying right away so I can get them out the door. I tend to wait a little bit on those things, and see how it dries and see how it's going to look, so I use tinted shellac, sometimes depending on the if I want to change like the tone of something. It pretty much everything that I do is kind of like that, where I take a step back and I look and, see how it's all coming together. I do it with the handles. I do it with, my finishing. I do it with the way I shape the fronts of soles and the heels of soles. I like to take my time and, and make sure that it's going to come out the way that I want it to, and the way maybe somebody's expecting or the way somebody wants. I do, and I think I bring that to, to the whole, from beginning to end. I like to evaluate the way, the way it's, because I want to be happy with it too. I won't send out something that, I'm not happy with. I remade a saw, one of the first saws I made 3 times. Even though it was right the first time and the second time, I wasn't happy with, the way the saw looked, and I changed little things until finally I sent it out on the 3rd try. With the customer, I've been happy maybe with the first saw, maybe. I think the 3rd saw was nicer though, and it was more what he was looking for. I do, with the finishing, it's the same way. I'm trying to achieve something, that I can see in my head and trying to make that happen, and if it takes a little bit longer, it takes a little bit longer. So I'm slow and steady.
Have you got any saws there with you?
No, I mean, it'd take me about 30 seconds to grab one.
It's okay. I mean,
I have some pictures of ones that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, go for it, please. I mean, we haven't had the time to get to that really. Well, why don't you show us share some pictures of the progression of making a saw from start to finish?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah.
That I'm. Here is actually. So this is a picture of my workshop. Can all of you guys see that? Is that up there?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah.
So I did take some pictures and stuff. So this is my workshop. It's, I'm using a wide angle lens. It's, 8 by 15 from the bottom of the basement stairs over to the wall where I'm standing. That's all, all of this, everything that I need is right there. I mean, I wish there was some more space, but unfortunately there's not. And I do have a picture of some saws. Okay. Sorry, bear with me a moment here. I'm new to this. All right. Okay, so here's one I'm working on now. I have got the basics of the handle shaped. I still needs to have the bevels put on the cheeks and some other stuff. But this was for a customer who wanted a 14-inch open-handled back saw. So I haven't made one that looks like this before. This is a first for me. I figured I'd give them something a little bit different. It has an Apple handle, and the handle is actually an 1840s Henry Distant handle that I reproduced because there were handles that that I designed myself for a little bit less. This one's chunkier. It's heftier. It's a little bit beefier than mine, and it has a smaller space in between the horns. And with that much weight on the front end of the saw, I wanted something with a little bit tighter of a fit when you're holding it, to help support all of that weight out front. So I went with this. So I made this handle. But in order to do that, I have to find a picture of one, and then, print it to scale and to size, and, and then, so I have a template, and then, I move on from there. So it's, to do these, certain of these like customization stuff, it, the more customized saws, a little bit more goes into it. It does, like I said, take me longer, but I think in the end, I come up with something, like this, that, when I started the saw, I just, I had some basics that the gentleman had given me. and then he kind of let me run with it. And what was seen in that picture is not necessarily what I imagined at the start, because I start working on something and then I just kind of see where it goes a lot of times. So, this is where, this one ended up. And so far so good. I like this apple a lot. It's hard to find. I'm running a little low on it. And then I have, let's see, here is, okay. All right. So this is this is made from the handle's made from the same apple board that I used for the last saw, but this one has a different front end on it. This is the one I make on a lot of my saws. This is a 12-inch open handle. This handle is actually one I designed myself. It'll in the end it'll be a little bit slimmer looking than the other one. But the first saw I made, the gentleman I was making it for, the guy who finally, I had been talking about making saws for a while, and while I was trying to make some, I wasn't going out of my way to actually find anyone who wanted one. The longer I put it off, the longer I had to just, keep doing it for myself, and practicing. So finally this guy, had me make him one, another saw maker. And he had seen some of my other work, and he described it, as kind of, I forget the exact words he used, but it put me in mind of Viking. So the first saw I made, I ran with the theme, and I try to give the front of the saw the look of like the prow on it, like on an old longship. And I really liked it, and I've kind of stuck with it since then. But all this is shaped by hand with files. Everything, any of the shaping like that, I cut out a little bit of it with the shear, and then I do all the rounding stuff with files. So both of these, this one doesn't have any work done to the handle other than I've cut the mortise in the slot. I saw the slot by hand. The mortise where the back goes into the handle, I do that with a chisel. I lose maybe, honestly, 1 out of every 3 saws to shoddy chisel work on my part, or a slightly crooked slot. I don't have the best, the nerves in I'm left-handed, the nerves in my left hand make my hands a little shaky, and I'm not real good with the chisel. And I don't have a lot of experience woodworking before this, at least with fine detail stuff. So, like I said, something that, I continually work at to try and get better. And there's ways I could do it on a router. I mean, I know that there's ways that you can do it like that, but I do enjoy, doing it by hand. And I keep hoping that eventually, those numbers will, start to get a little bit bigger of a gap than they are right now. Here, I got one more that's, let's see, almost done. So then here, so here's one I'm making actually for a friend's, a friend of mine's friend. So this one is a little bit different too. The front end on this one, I put a little bit more into it, and then it has it's going to be it's a triple cove closed handle out of tiger maple, a nice piece of tiger maple. I still have a lot of work left to do on it, but you can see now these are all 2 12-inch saws and a 14-inch saw, and every one of them has been different. And this is why it's hard for me to make a jig that will make certain things repeatable. The mortises, none of the the individual parts are the same size. I mean, not even the length of the backs are different, even though there's 2 12-inch saws. So because of that, it leads to a lot of each piece is its own piece, each saw is its own saw. And it's interesting, it makes for a I feel like I've gained a lot of experience learning to do these different things too, that maybe, other people. Okay, there you go. So this is a little dovetail saw that I'm making for myself. It has a Caribbean rosewood handle. It's just a little guy. I don't have a small fine cut crosscut saw. So this one's almost done. The finish on it isn't quite as high as I do on my other stuff because it's for me, and I need it to work, and sooner rather than later. But I was like the nice look-alike rosewood handle. I was curious to see whether I could fit that detailing on the front on such a small saw. It's only 9 inches long. It would be toothed to 15 or 16 points per inch, to give like a nice smooth cut on cross-cut stuff. And so those are some of the ones I'm working on now. There's 4 saws, from 14 inches down to 9 inches, and none of them exactly the same.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm going to ask you one last question before we move on to the part where everyone else can ask you questions.
Okay.
So, how can someone purchase one of your saws?
They can't. I mean, in reality, you can, but I take orders, from people if they're interested. Get in touch with me, and we'll talk it out. My wait list is at the moment, I try and keep the number of people on it, small, because once it starts getting too big, I spend more time looking at the list and thinking about how I owe all these people a saw than I do actually making a saw for them. So, I take orders. Most of the people I have made saws for so far are people I've dealt with who've been watching me, for the last year as I, develop a style and kind of, figured out how to do these things. Like I said, it does take me a little while to make a saw. Anybody can get in touch with me. I get people who message me. I don't really have a website. I have a Facebook, Spring Green Saws, it's called, but there's nothing really on it, because to be honest, I'm not a businessman, really. I just enjoy making saws, and one thing has led to another, and I make them for people, and I sell one every 3 weeks on the Can I Have It Facebook auction page. I put a saw up on there, a saw or two every 3 weeks. But other than that, I'm not really a businessman. I like making saws. It's really all it comes down to, and it's why I didn't start out in this to to make money or have a business or anything else. I wanted to make a saw for a friend of mine, Mike Stemple, who's taught me a lot.
Yeah,
and,
I know Mike.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Guy loves saws, and I've been out to visit him, and he's a lot of what I know about older saws and stuff like that, and older methods that were used, and about details on handles and stuff. A lot of that information has come from talking to him, and and he's taught me a lot. So I wanted to make him a saw, and in order to do that, I had to figure out how to make saws. And his was the first one that I made for somebody, and things have kind of moved on from there. But it's still not, I mean, it's just something I enjoy doing, I think, which is part, lots of people enjoy their jobs, but I think to date I've sold like 20 saws maybe. I work slowly, I make sure that and then I send them out, and I know that I'm happy with everyone that I've made, to date, and I want to continue, to be happy, with the ones that I make, and I'd like to continue enjoying it. So, I have time on my hands as a stay-at-home dad, so I make saws because I enjoy it. I'm not doing a great job of selling myself. I'm not really my, strong suit, because it's really, I enjoy doing it, which is part of the reason though that I think, a lot of the people who have contacted me about buying a saw or making a saw for them, I've never, no one's ever complained that it takes too long, or, or that, or wondering how things are going. I try to keep people up to date on stuff. But they know that I just enjoy doing it. And so that I make them saws. It's more of it's less of a business for me than it is a more of like a personal transaction almost. Like I just, everybody, has a certain way they want things or whatever. And, since I move slowly and I can afford to move slowly, I try and give them what they want. I mean,
I think you've definitely shown your passion for saw making tonight. I'm gonna, well, this afternoon for you, of course. I'm gonna move on to the question section where everyone could pop their name in the chat. Those, I think there are a few new names joining us tonight. So if you put your name in the chat, you've got a chance to ask a question to Charlie yourself, and I'll ask you to unmute. So well, I'm going to remove myself from the spotlight and add Jim, who's tonight's first question, to the spotlight. There we go, Jim.
I can't believe I've made it first. That's a first for me. Excellent. That was fantastic, Charlie. Excellent. And I have to really apologize because I wasn't, I had to go back when Shrenik mentioned you and look through all the posts on the Facebook group, which I'm not a member of, and had a look through them, and there's some superb work there. And I thought you'd been doing it for quite a few years, and it's quite a shock to find out that it's almost an extended hobby that's been only going for a year, and that you haven't done much woodworking prior to that. So maximum kudos there. One of my questions, therefore, extends from that is, where do you see yourself going with this? Because obviously the supply is going to be quite high, I would have thought, of that sort of caliber, and the demand looks like it might come forth progressively or exponentially from henceforth. Do you find yourself wanting to go into greater production? And this is something I'm asking because it's something I've found myself fighting my head over, that, and one of the reasons why I don't sell any of the tools that I make is simply because I just never would get around to working it out. So what plan have you got, since you're starting to sell them now, even in those sort of small volumes? What plans have you got for future expansion?
That you bring up a problem that that I've been struggling with as well. Yes, I do. I have been selling some of them. The flip side of that is some of the ones that I've sold. Like I've done for relatively cheap to for some people here or there, or people. I've made a couple for free and sent to I remember what it was like when I started out woodworking, and I found out how much like a decent tool costs, and it's expensive, and I couldn't afford it. So there's guys here and there who who maybe need a saw or something like that, and I keep my eye out on the saws page, and I'll reach out occasionally. And so the prices in the auction, I do get good good prices on my saws, and that's why I do it. And then it helps me be able to do things like on the other side of that by sending stuff out for free and things like that, because I don't to be honest, Jim, I don't know. I'm torn between the same thing. Like, I enjoy doing things for people. Unfortunately, without a job, materials and stuff cost money. So I'm not necessarily trying to to make this a job, but at the same time, it would be nice to be able to get things out faster. I'm currently looking for to lease shop space to get into a real shop. Both my daughters are old enough to be in school now, so I don't actually have to be at the house all the time, which is nice. So I'm trying to get into a bigger shop so I can get some nicer equipment, so I can continue to make saws slowly, I guess. I don't know. I would like to be able to do things in a faster and get saws out faster. I haven't quite worked out how to do that and stay true to the way I want to do things. It's something I struggle with a lot, because with speed comes, a certain repetitiveness that I've been desperately trying to avoid. And I don't want to start putting things out faster and then find that I'm only making 3 saws. I want to continue to do custom stuff for people. I'm going to try and continue, I like doing it by hand. And and the thing is, it's a lot of the skills that I've learned, doing it by hand are essential, and I've gotten better at it. So I like the way I do it. I know that there's easier ways I could do it now. I get a lot of suggestions from people about, do this or, do that. It'll be easier, it'll be faster. And I was trying to explain, I like doing it by hand. I like the time that, goes into each one. I like being able to, to think it through as I'm making it, something that I can't necessarily do, if I'm running from machine to machine, and trying to get things done quickly. I have no problem with, with saws that are made that way. And, I think everybody does things their own way. And since this was never really intended to be a business, and because I knew I could never really compete on a production level, with people, I got used to the idea of doing, of making one good saw at a time. That's what I write on my saw boxes, proudly making one good saw at a time. And I'm going to try and stick to that as much as possible. I've been turning down, orders for a while now, not taking any new ones. So I finished my list. Not, thinking of it not as a business, allows me to do stuff like that. Because I'm not always looking for to have a full list and get out as many as possible. It's completely backwards thinking and everything else, but it's the only way I can do it and still, enjoy what I'm doing. And I want to continue to enjoy it. So
I think you're lucky that you've got that philosophy, because I think that's the right fit for you. And I think it's perfect. And I would try to expand on your art. So look at them as individual paintings, if you like. And I think I totally agree with you about the charitable side of things and the gifting side of things and paying forward. But the ones that are then commissioned should then carry, the cost to the person who's buying them, is willing to pay for that. And I think because they are unique, each of them, individual, they are like an original painting. They are like of value, intrinsic value to the person who's commissioned them. Otherwise, they wouldn't commission them. Reputation then builds up, and I think that's the right model for you. And as long as you, as Shane said in his bench talk meeting, he could actually probably earn more money at McDonald's, and he's chucking out quite a large volume, using jigs, using processes, using multiplication factors along the line. And Carl Holte had the same thing when he started making hand planes. He moved on to CNC. There's certain shortcuts you could have, but I think like following along with the same analogy of an artist, if you stay with what you're doing and you're expanding your horizons with regards to the design aspect of the saw itself, each individual one is a progression of a design and an original. And I think that as long as you're covering your material costs, it seems to me like that's the way to go. And I think it's beautiful to see a new saw maker, virtually I would call you a village saw maker, which you would have had in Britain back in the day, who just made for the local community. And that's, I've got a plate in my workshop. This is gentleman's name, and he was a village saw maker, and he made them for the local craftsmen. He probably made the same volume as you did, and those are saws that people collect today, 200 years later, and look at this masterpiece and the rarity of it. And I think that's the right formula. So, but thank you so much for coming on, because it's people like yourself that really are going to make the craft go forward. Definitely.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that I take that as a huge compliment. Village Sawmaker, like that's, to me, that is, is a perfect fit. And I like that sounds fine to me. And that's the thing. And it is a struggle to try and, find that balance between, putting them out, putting enough out there, and still taking the time to, because I've said this before, like I do look at each one, as an individual piece. And, I like looking at it like that. I thank you. I appreciate what you said.
I'll pass it back to you, Trenick, so you can have someone else have a chat.
Thanks, Jim. I think those were that was a wonderful discussion there between the two of you. Over to Paul Smithies.
Hi, Charlie.
How you doing?
Thanks for the talk. It was a great talk. It's nice to put a face to the name, because I followed you on the Facebook group for quite a while now, and I've seen the progression and just marvelled at the saw handles that you've been producing.
Thank you.
Which, and where do you source your saw nuts from?
Oh, those I get from, I had two sources actually. I get a smaller size from Blackburn Tools, Isaac Smith at Blackburn Tools. And at the 1/2 inch size that I've been using most recently, I get from Chase Clancy. Chase Clancy.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's he had a local the 1/2 inch ones, he had a local machinist make up a batch, and he'd asked me, for about a couple, I helped him with the specs, just a little bit, a smidge. It was all his work. I just answered a couple questions. And that's the hardest thing to find, and I made some by hand. It was not easy. It took me a really long time without a lathe or anything. It was serviceable. However, I'd spend the rest of my life making enough to get out 5 saws, and I'm not making saws, so I quickly gave that up. But I wanted to try and do it just to see. I do a lot of stuff, just to see if I can actually. It seems like I always do things the hard way, and everybody says that making your own hardware is eventually the final piece where you can make everything in house. And I agree that is true. I don't have I didn't have any metalworking experience before I started making saws. I don't have that much more now. I've never run anything on a lathe. I turned a handle for a gent saw. I made that on my drill press too. So I don't really have the know-how to be able to do something like that. So for right now, I source from Blackburn and from Chase.
Yeah, but I have noticed that you're always very good with your time on trying to help people out on the site. If somebody's got a question, you quite often were the first ones to respond with a positive answer, rather than occasionally on some of the sites it can get a little bit gnarly, shall we say. If somebody asks, a very simple question, but you'll generally step up and just sort of answer it.
I'm sorry, there's an airport over my house, and of course a plane went by at the overhead. I got the window open at the end of that question. I didn't catch the end of it. I'm sorry. I do try and help people out though on the site. As I got a lot of help from a lot of people. Maybe not in the processes needed to make a saw or anything like that, but so many people have been so supportive, and have helped me in one way or another, or given me advice. And I try and pay that back. I mean, it's a nice community. When I first got into tools, I met a couple of real snarky people who, were not real forthcoming with their knowledge or anything else, and it was very discouraging, when I had first started out, and I was very leery about, joining any sort of group, that was focused on one thing. But my thirst for knowledge kind of outweighed my misgivings, and I joined the Saws page, and it's been great. I mean, the people on there and the amount of information that gets shared and what people have shared with me, and what I've learned from that. So yes, I mean, I do try, and I do believe in in sharing it around like that, and I'm just trying to give back some of what what people have done for me. Almost all of my knowledge comes about saws in general, comes from somewhere else or from someone else. I mean, I do research my own stuff, but I needed a base for it, and people like Mike Stemple, gave me that base to build upon. Without people like that, I'd probably still be trying to figure out what a backsaw was.
Sure. Well, thank you. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks again for some brilliant supportive comments for Charlie. Over across the Irish Sea to Sean O'Donnell.
How you doing, Charlie? That was a fantastic talk. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I was wondering, would you consider yourself at all opinionated in your sense of saw design? Is there a saw feature you never want to have to make and you don't want to have to deal with a customer if they asked for it? Is there something you think is a bad idea and it's the wrong road to go down and you discourage?
I've actually thought about this. The answer, I mean, truthfully, probably yes and no. There are some things that I am opinionated. I can be a right prick sometimes. Anybody who's dealt with me on Facebook, I am nice 90% of the time. I can unintentionally be mean about things. That's just the truth. There's no avoiding that. However, I try and work with people with what they want, and I'm willing to. I like a challenge, so I'm willing to. There's nothing I think that I would say no to, maybe outright. Maybe after some consideration or giving it a try, I might suggest a different route. Would I ever just say no? I won't make that for you. I'd have to see what the request was first, honestly. I mean, hey, there might be a chance that I would. I mean, I would explain why. If I thought making something a certain way was going to result in a bad product, and not necessarily that would reflect badly on me, but just something that somebody is going to spend money on, and that and they want. I don't want them to spend the money on something that's not going to work for them. I guess it has less to do, I think, with my reputation or anything like that than it does with somebody to be disappointed in the end that they've shelled out all of this, because unfortunately I am a right prick. But however, I also and I would feel terrible and have to give them the money back, whether it was my idea or not, just because I think that's why I would say no, because I know in the end that's if it was something like that, then yeah, I might, and I would try and explain my reasoning and try and convince them otherwise. I don't know if they dug in whether I would fully commit to saying I won't do that for you. But we'll see.
It's a strange type of right prick who would give money back so easily. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
I guess it depends on what side of the argument you're standing on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I try and give people what they want, as long within reason, I guess.
Nice. The other thing is, I was fascinated by that picture of the saw from Belfast you posted the other night. I'm going to have to hit you up on Facebook and find out some more about that. I'm a junkie for Irish tools, but thank you very much, Charlie.
You're welcome. I took it down only because I didn't want things to get out of hand. The comments went a different way than I was expecting. So I pulled it back down because I wasn't trying to spark an argument or or anything else. So yes, I did pull it down rather quickly.
I don't think you did. Those two go back and forth all the time without you being involved. Don't worry about it.
Oh, you just saw. Oh, did you just see you just saw the picture of the spine with the stamp?
That's those two can go back. I know them both. They're not like that all the time. Don't worry about it. But the Belfast stamp on the saw, that got my interest. Shortly after that, I posted the whole saw. Oh wow! And I created a new post for it. Bob's a friend of mine, and I posted it. Had a little poke at him about no Irish saws existing, but immediately the comments that came in were going a different way, than I was expecting. So I pulled it back down again because I wasn't, trying to start any sort of political. It's a really cool saw, and I have it on good authority that there aren't very many of them, stamped, out there. I'm no expert collector, but it's the first one I've seen. Yeah. It was the first one I had seen too. When I saw it, I snatched it up and ran. I paid for it first, but then I ran in case the guy changed his mind.
Yeah, it's a really cool saw. Yeah, and anytime I'll show you some pictures of it.
That'll be fantastic. Thank you very much, Charlie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sean, for bringing the Irish the side of it, the discussion. Right. Well, we're over to the last question tonight. Before I ask one last question to you, Charlie, over to Chester.
Hey, Charlie, that was a great talk.
Thank you.
First, when you mentioned McMaster Carr, I went and grabbed my catalog because it's such an amazing source. But unfortunately, my catalog is a little old. It was 1940. So I'm gonna have to get a new catalog. But they did sell the same things that they do today. It's a pretty amazing source for steel, for rods, for different octagonal rods, square rods. Pretty amazing.
I was amazed when I actually because I'm the type of guy who looks through all the different things. I'm like, stuff I don't even need. I'm like, oh, casting compounds. I have no idea what you still have for this, but let's check it out. So
yeah,
they're amazing. I had never heard of them. My wife told me about them.
Yeah, asphaltum finishes for steel, not just Japanning, but all sorts of things. But my questions for you were, I kind of wrote down little notes. What types of saws have you made? I'm seeing the back saws. Have you ever made any non-back saws?
I have. None that I've sold. None since I started making. The first couple saws I made were made what I call spare part saws. Old saw plates that I would put new handles on and reshape and stuff like that. I've made some hand saws that I use out of old saw plate. I have two panel saws plates cut out and ready to go. However, I'm not going to make them until I figure out the tapering a little bit better, because I want to make a matched set of panel saws, a rip and a cross cut.
Nice.
I have the handles to go on them. They're modeled on a saw that I have. I want that tapered saw plate though. It does it helps with the cut, and
sure,
I think it lends a certain I don't know, it's something difficult, and I like to do difficult things. I guess is what it comes down to.
Well, I always wondered on those how you control the tension and the warp on those. So that might be a little more strategic than even the back saw, because the back assists you in some of that.
Right.
The other thing is, are you cutting your teeth totally filing them, or are you snipping them off and then you're totally by filing each one, so cutting smooth. So it takes you quite a bit of time to go through that process.
And it's I guess we're coming up on it's been 10 months now, I guess, but the first saw that I made it's made from parts from a kit. I couldn't even sharpen it. The teeth came cut onto the plate, but I couldn't sharpen it because I had been reading about it for months, everything I could find. I knew all the aspects of it. I had asked all the right questions, and I had to understand. All I had to do was put file to metal, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just and then eventually I signed up for a saw sharpening class with a guy from Warwick, Rhode Island, actually, Matt Cianci, and I was terrified of embarrassing myself at his class by not knowing what I was doing. That I just picked up the file 2 days before the class and practiced a little bit, so I could at least not look like a total newbie when I went to the class. And that finally put me over the edge into doing it. But I have a retoother. It doesn't, for a lot of the back saws I make. I don't have the right bars for it, but I could do hand saws, and I retooth most things. It's not set up. It's sitting in pieces in my basement. I have an Acme saw filer too. I use the vise. I don't use the saw filer. Everybody, asks me why. And
I think
the truth is,
I think you explained that pretty well, because, and that was the last bit that I wanted to mention to you, that there's an old poem that I don't recall exactly, but it describes the difference between a craftsman and an artist. And a craftsman is a certain level of skill, and an artist is that combination of that certain level of skill and heart. And I am a firm believer and have practiced what you're going through for all my life, in that I was always told that I needed to come up with some product that I could mass produce and make a lot of money. And whereas my goal was never to repeat something, and always to do something new and something I could learn on and something that I could love as I created it. So I totally understand that mentality. And I think you're right on. And I think that's going to be the key. When you're my age, you'll look back and say, I loved all the things that I made and I loved the process. So my congratulations for arriving there early. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. I will say this. I've had a lot of jobs. I've worked with my hands my whole life, never in, any sort of craft industry. I've worked with my hands my whole life. This is the only thing, I've had lots of things that I like to do, and, I've been curious about and studied, whatever job I had, I followed wherever my mind, if I had questions about wanting to, I'd go and take a job. I learned to cut stone and build pools and, whatever I was curious about. This is the only thing I've ever done that I love doing. And I do. I kind of fell into it, making saw handles at first. Only thing I've ever been good at, kind of semi, from the jump. I don't know how or why, or people ask, I can't really explain it. Like, I decided to make a handle and it went well. But I love doing this, and I don't want to lose that. I can understand.
That's what's
that.
important. That's what's important. And by the way, I love where you live. My cousin lives on Block Island. It's a beautiful area. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So anyway, great conversation. Thank you for presenting today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chester. I'm gonna allow Phil to ask one last question, and then I'll ask my closing question. Just need to find Phil, and there we go. Here we go.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
Hi, thanks again. That really was great, and it was a very personal view of your approach and how you go about it, how you think about what you do as well as how you go about it. So kind of in that vein, I think you said you are still, you've read a lot, you've researched a lot, but equally there's not that much to research. There's no A to Z of how to make a saw. I just wondered, as you've worked it out for yourself, made it up as you go along, spin it as you will, have you ever found that as you've read further, you've reinvented a technique that somebody documented before you?
No.
Maybe not. Okay.
Well, only because, if I understand you correctly, there are some things out there that, people don't necessarily, ways of, filing saws, that go beyond, just like the tooth geometry, but how you use the file and stuff. I don't claim to understand all of it. There's guys out there, who've held a file in their hands, sharpening saw for years, who understand it much better than I do. So I would say no. I haven't, even though I work like it's 1850 half the time. It's, most of the stuff, is pretty, it's pretty well known. The only thing that I do that's, that I don't know of any other modern type, maker to do is, that they used to do is the Earnest back saw handles. I make a saw handle that has a full, Earnest around the outside and partly on the inside, which is something that was never really seen on back saws, but they used to on hand saws a lot.
Okay.
Somebody asked me to make it one, like that. That's the only thing that even comes close. Other than that, I'm just following in the footsteps of people who have done it better and for longer and a longer time ago, and trying to do as well as they.
But working it out yourself where there's gaps as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Shining back to you. Thank you.
Well, I guess I've got a closing question here, Charlie. What's your favorite saw maker? I guess it would be nice to split it between American and British saw makers, or English saw makers.
Toughest question of the night or day for me, night for you. Wow. I don't have I I don't have a favorite saw maker. I have a lot of or I have a lot of favorite saw makers. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But for for British saws, that's a little bit easier for me. Well, not really. There's a couple of those I like as well, but I have a couple of Samuel Biggin saws that I like. What's his name? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. I never draw a blank on saws. Damn it. JV, I have a Hill Late Hal. I don't know. I have a bunch of British saws. My favorite British saw that I have, I can tell you that this much, that I have a Newbold and Company. That's my oldest saw. It's not in the best of shape, although it is all there. Is most likely a 18th century saw. It's most likely based on the stamp, 1780s or 1790s. And that's one of my favorite saws just in general because of all of the history there and the fact that it survived and it's sitting in my basement. And I found it on a shelf in New Hampshire, buried under a whole bunch of stuff, like as I was walking out the door of a shop, it was like, oh, hey. So I love saws. I love all saws. Cortland Wood, I'm a big fan of his work. Made saws in New York. Josiah Bakewell, he's one of my favorites as well. Great handle makers. Whoever was making their handles, or whoever they were all people who came over came across the pond anyway. But both 1850s saw makers, they make great handles. Saw's got to have a great makers. If it has a nice handle, it needs a nice handle. I'm a handle guy.
I guess I'll rephrase the question a little bit to get a nicer answer out of you. Which one inspires you the most?
Ooh, wow.
Is that just as tough?
It is, because the thing is, and this is true. Like, I love saws. Also, like, in January of what is it, 2020? January of 2020 is when I ended up buying my first real saw. Right, we moved to Rhode Island. We had a fireplace. I was trying to figure out a better way to cut firewood. I realized I didn't know that much about saws. Like, I was looking for a rip saw. I figured, and I bought this handsaw. And ever since then, I went from having I have like my basement in the workshop stuffed full of saws, because I genuinely like. I mean, the older ones anyway. The newer ones I don't. But I love saws in general, and each one has a different aspect about it, or maybe something that I like, or something that I don't like. Atkins saws, they make really nice saws. However, sometimes I find the saw plates be a little bit thin on them. They run really nice in the cut, but they also tend to bend, very easily. The Josiah Bakewell saws, his hand saws, and the handle's beautiful. His back saws, is like a different guy made the handles. It's very strange to me. Cortland Wood, all Cuban mahogany handles. Well, a lot of them anyway. And these great big, steel dome nuts. And I've made handles by all three of those makers. And I enjoyed making, recreating each one of them. And I've made handles probably from probably close to 20 saw makers now. I've lost count of how many different handles I've made. And there's something that I've learned from each and every one of them. There's the little details that go into, what makes a nice handle, or, what makes a comfortable handle. Are myriad. There's so many different things. And then on top of that, everybody's preference for what they like is, is so different. You can have, for a while when I first started making handles, people used to say, oh, the space between the, it looks too small, it looks too small. And I was, oh, it looks too big, it looks too big, and I realized none of these people have ever held one of the handles, but it's just because everybody looks at it and they see something different. And I think it's all inspiring. I think that looking at a lot of stuff, whether it's from Britain, England, from the States, wherever, I think that there is such a variety and such a, so much more to learn, that I'll continually be, inspired by, by saws. The day that I'm not, then I'll probably stop making saws, but I don't foresee that, happening. I just, I wrote like a post one time about the difference in camphor stops or something on saw handles, and everybody's probably like looking around at themselves. I can imagine like, oh, what? It was probably the most boring and dry post I've ever written, and I found it so interesting because they tell a story, and wooden planes. I know there's guys out there who look at the flats and whether it's actually a flat or this or that, and they look at these, and to them, the wooden planes tell a story, like when it was made, where it was made, and they can tell whether it's a New England or this or that, by the shape of the wedge. Blows my mind. Saw handles are the same way, and no matter who makes it, they all tell a story. The newer ones, it's not a great story. The older ones, those tell a great story. A lot of beautiful and talented handle makers out there, from 150 years ago. And all I can do is try my best to be inspired by them, and the ones that I recreate, and I do a lot of replication and reproduction, and I try and get as close as possible to the original. And the reason I do that is because it is inspiring, and I don't have a favorite. They're all my favorite, honestly. Is the best way, I guess, to describe. There's some I don't like. I mean, there are some. I can't name one at the moment, but I'm sure there's some I don't like. There's and there's ones I like more than others. It also depends on my mood and what saw I'm looking at the moment.
Well, Charlie, this sounds like a lovely way to end the discussion tonight, and I think in Bench Talk tradition, we raise a bench beverage to say thank you and cheers to Charlie, and cheers to the bench.
Cheers, Charlie.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I do. This was nice, and I definitely enjoyed doing it. I was a little bit, speaking to a group of people isn't high on my list of, things that I'm good at. So I do appreciate you all having me.